Oh, no problem. The Meridian Conservation Corps has collected native seeds, and a couple of those are moist adapted, wet adapted, Joe Pye weed and bergamot. And those seed packets are available to township residents for free. And there's probably a couple other ones. I would urge you to contact Emma Campbell, who is our, what is her specific title?
Land Stewardship Coordinator.
There we go.
I can post her phone number, although she's often out in the field doing her thing.
Yep.
As many of you know, she's a great person to just bounce ideas with. And by volunteering for one of her days events, you kind of get a chance to work shoulder to shoulder with her and ask her questions.
She's also put together a really nice native plant guide that's available for free on the township website as well, which would give you a lot of good ideas for where to start.
Awesome. Thank you. In terms of the grant itself, how do you all prefer, I mean, how built out does the proposal need to be, or like the planning need to be for that?
We prefer, well, we look at the proposals based on sort of clarity, ecological value, and what's the other one, John?
Educational value.
Educational value, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it like other grant applications where you have to come up with a like a budget?
Yeah, it helps to have a budget and a plan, and but it starts with a vision. So you're sort of already 80% of the way there, and it's part of it's sort of filling in the details and continuing to do some research, look at potential partners. We do have a pretty full slate of proposals, though I just heard from one of the people on the team that if we get additional requests, we potentially could go back to the board and ask for additional funding. So it's not out of the question that it would happen this year, but based on some of the resources that have already come up in this conversation, it wouldn't hurt to just get started, whether or not you get a grant or not, just putting the pieces together and putting together a plan. But I'm sure other people have ideas as well. But it's a good question. I can share the grant information also in the chat.
Leroy does a good job of keeping the application process pretty simple. And so the proposals could just be a matter of a few pages as long as it's got the key information. And, I think the educational value is kind of like a key element in that, you want these good projects, the information to be spread around. And of course,
list there. My name is Roberta, and I have a question because I also live in a neighborhood with ditches. My understanding is the original reason the ditches were there was to act as a rainwater collection basin and to channel. So, for example, in my neighborhood, at the end of everything is channeled through the ditch down to the corner where there is a catch basin. Now, over the years, that's kind of gotten real muddy, quote unquote muddy, because grass has grown in. Many of the drainage pipes under driveways have gotten filled in over the years. I'm wondering how that would impact this kind of an idea. I mean, would it be valuable to talk with, I don't know who covers, is that the Drain Commission, or, I mean, who would somebody ask?
Well, yeah, the Drain Commissioner's office, if you're in the Tower Gardens area,
No, I'm in the Wardcliff area.
Okay,
If I could jump in a little bit there, maybe. It really just depends on who has jurisdiction over the road. You know, it could be a
Okay.
city or it could be the county. Typically, those are the two jurisdictions. But, you know, and they have, you're probably familiar, you know, a road has an easement or right of way, which typically includes the ditch. And so it's whoever has jurisdiction, it's their responsibility to maintain that ditch. And from time to time, they'll come in and just scrape everything out of there. I mean, that's the standard procedure for maintaining those ditches. So you gotta be aware of whatever you do in there is subject to whoever has jurisdiction over the area to maintain it the way they want to. So it's a good idea to communicate with those people before you jump in. But, you know, Jessica, when you were talking about plants, you know, if you just Google up plants for bioswales, you'll get, you know, or some of these others. You know, I'd have to look at the list again myself to refresh myself with all those names, but yeah, just Google it up and you'll see a bunch of them. You know, what grows everywhere is just, I don't know if it's native, but ditch lilies or, you know, Hemerocallis, basically daylilies that are not the ones that are the hybrids that you see and everybody wants to collect for their gardens, but just the ones that grow wild, the orange flowers, whether or not they're native, but they put on quite a show, just like dandelions. You know, dandelions aren't native either, but they're definitely showy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the ditch maintenance, because I think that's probably the biggest obstacle, at least in my mind, is who has jurisdiction over it. Are we allowed to plant things in there? I'm sure it has to be like under a certain height, so it's not obstructing like views, especially if you're around a corner. So there's some of those logistic things that I'm researching as well, or like how far off the road it needs to be and things like that. So yeah, I guess so I'm in Tacoma Hills area. Is it that various people have like jurisdiction over is it like, tell me, do you know anything about that? Like who?
I'm gonna guess if you're in Tacoma Hills that it's not a county road. It's a subdivision, and
Right.
I'm just gonna guess that it's Meridian Township,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
Public Works Department. But I would start with those guys and ask them, and if they don't have jurisdiction, they'll probably tell you.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
I think we talked about this once before, and I asked the question regarding, you know, in the neighborhoods, the ditches and the culverts under driveways, who was responsible for that? And it came down to the landowner
Okay.
in those areas to keep those clear. I live in Ottawa Hills, and it's the same thing. There are a couple of roads in our subdivision that are basically the culverts under driveways are chock full of dirt and debris from over the years. And one road, Iroquois, it tends to flood like about 6 inches deep because those culverts are clogged and nobody takes care of them.
Mhm.
You know, Bruce, that's a good point. I've been working in urban areas for so long. I just have this mindset that it's usually the municipality, but when you get into residential subdivisions, it could be the homeowners association, it could be anybody. And it can vary from housing development to housing development. So it's just worth checking into.
Yeah.
I love the idea of putting together a plan and maybe also connecting with some of the neighbors that already have started to do some creative things. Some of the research on natural shorelines suggests that start with the people who are ready to go, the early adopters, rather than trying to convince everybody. And as far as the township goes, if it's an intentional and somewhat maintained area, it's less likely to be an infraction. There are some lawn height restrictions, but they're more and more supportive of native gardens, rain gardens. And so that's the good news. And then people like Emma and Bruce and others that Athena maybe has been doing a lot of research on this for her yard. Also, the Drain Commission has provided some of their drawings and plans for the tower, depending on if the site is wet, dry, sunny, shady, and we could share those plans with anybody as well.
Cecilia, she used to come to these meetings. She's seemed pretty knowledgeable about drainage issues.
Yeah, she used to work with the drain office, I guess. So she might be a good person to invite back.
I was just going to say, in interviewing people back in August, in that little research project I did, I was struck how many people were motivated by neighbors who took the initiative to get rid of weeds, for example. And, many of them felt guilty and said, wow, I can't believe that person, spent all that time and money to get rid of the garlic mustard. It's probably my turn. And I would think that kind of mindset, the early adopters motivating others, is probably a good model. The other thing is, I'm sure there are exasperated neighbors who don't know what to do with some of these ditches. And I'm sure that having a creative idea might be a great encouragement to do something that's would actually not only make their life easier, but beautify the neighborhood, so I kind of exciting.
Yeah, I like that idea. I know there's a couple people who are even just on my same street who are very interested in native gardens and frustrated with the drainage and the water pooling, and how that then also exacerbates the mosquito population when it comes around, and all
Sure.
kinds of stuff. One of the cool things I saw about when I was researching the ditch gardens is that it also helps with speeding issues on the roads. It helps people like slow down a bit, which is kind of nice too. That's always a nice bonus. I'm on one of the main streets in our neighborhood, so it can get a little speedy sometimes. So I was like, ooh, that could be a nice little selling point as well.
Instead of having those signs, drive like your pets or kids live here, you can
Yeah,
motivate people to drive because they want to see this.
right, exactly. Yeah.
That's a good point to put in your grant application too, and you call that traffic calming.
Mhm, mhm.
Technical word, if you want to use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tacoma Hills struck me as having a pretty good neighborhood association
Yeah.
going. They do the chimney things, or that's not what they call them. The little they put a candle in a bag.
Oh yeah,
stick along their street. Is it?
the luminaries.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have neighborhood yard sales and things like that. So
Mhm.
I don't think it'd be difficult to get them on board with some of the ideas that you have.
Yeah. We've
It
shared,
seems that way.
yeah, they've shared some stuff about native gardens too, and some education points in like the newsletters to the residents. So I feel good about it. I just got to gather my thoughts together.
Well, there might be plenty of people who are ready to do more of this.
Yeah.
I know the Harris Nature Native Plant Sale is happening too, and some of the folks connected with that would also be helpful.
Yeah, I went to that last year. With Vern, I saw Kim shared an image from his presentation. yeah, it was super informative and I've got my order form ready to go. I got to turn it in in April. So yeah.
One of the issues in the older neighborhoods, sorry, where the culverts under the driveways are clogged or filled in, is that a homeowner is not able to clean that out. You need somebody that can go in there with like a roto-rooter
Mhm.
type equipment to get
Yeah.
that cleaned out. You can't just reach in there with a shovel because you don't have the reach. You know, the culvert is too long.
Yeah.
So it might be something that you would have to, whoever's responsible for keeping the culvert open, if it's the neighbors, you might want to get folks in the neighborhood to get together and maybe, I don't know if Roto-Rooter would even do something like that, but it's a difficult thing to open up once it's filled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
We use groundhogs in our neighborhood. They keep them closed or keep them open.
There you go. Yeah. All right.
Need
Well,
to train more.
I just want to say I have to hop off, but thank you all so much. I'll try and pop back into one of these meetings when I have some more thoughts gathered together too, and bounce them off your wonderful brains. So thank you, and I'll talk to you all later. All right, thank you.
Well, if people have more ideas, I can share this recording later. There's certainly a lot of rich ideas that were generated fairly quickly. So thank you.
Yeah. Athena mentioned garlic mustard. And I saw Michigan Radio, I believe, had a blurb about an aphid that it's actually an invasive aphid that wants to eat garlic mustard. So it's like the first thing that we've had show up to eat garlic mustard, but then what else does it eat? It's always a question when you bring in something invasive to eat something invasive.
That's a good
Well, the
point.
funny thing is, it originally was brought in as an edible, I believe, from England. And it is, there are all kinds of recipes for it, but it just, I don't know, even though I'm vegan, it's largely vegan, it's not very appetizing to me. I think, and I always wonder, when the apocalypse comes, maybe I'll regret having cleaned out my garden of it all. That's just, I'm fantasy, of course, but.
Any
That's
other?
really interesting. Yeah.
I'd love to, it probably already have a nice resource page for the township that kind of connects people with Emma, her plant guide, her, some of the contractors that do this, some of the designs for rain garden, but the wetland education team would also be a really good resource. Some of the people on that group have been doing this for many years. And I'm definitely going to suggest that she talk to, maybe she connect with that group. What else is on people's minds here?
I apologize. I had a meeting this morning. Can you guys repeat everything?
I already had Bruce do that. But I did make a recording of most of what we've talked about so far. We had a guest who wants to do some ditch gardens or rain gardens in her neighborhood, Tacoma Hills. So we were sort of brainstorming with her.
I guess the township had a couple of successful prescribed burns yesterday. One in Davis Foster Preserve, which is right along, let's see, Cornell, I believe. And then the other was in the Red Cedar Glen, which is on the west side of Lake Park. I went out and observed that one, and it's a pretty good day for a burn, very light wind, so it wasn't blowing everywhere. And they're hoping that we'll get a pretty good showing of the spring ephemeral flowers this year after the burn.
Hey, Bruce, that only happens every few years, right? It's not a regular annual thing, right?
Right. Yeah, it's every few years, although I think Red Cedar Glen, this is the first burn they've had there as far as I know. And there's a lot of really wet leaf litter that did not burn. It was just the top stuff. But it will also kill off some of the real straggly little shrubby things. And that'll allow some light to go through. And the way it was explained to me is that some of the new stuff that comes up will actually work as a prop for next year's leaf fall, so that there'll be a lot of air. The leaves won't get really wet, and they may actually do another burn next year that will be a much hotter burn that can reinvigorate that area even more. So there's a whole science to it, I guess.
I was really intrigued at the mix of techniques and potentially clashes in ideology. I'm speaking like an anthropologist, of course, but I mean, this is how I think, of different methods. For example, I was surprised that Vern mentioned that he actually uses pesticides. I mean, not pesticides, herbicides, as opposed to just, plant accompanying plants in a way that they would work compatibly to help each other, and other methods like burns, which he certainly uses, but he will use herbicides. And as a long-term organic gardener, that's something I've always avoided. So it kind of surprised me that you can use native plants, and many people who do use them would use herbicides. So it's something I need to explore more, but I found that, to me, what appeared to be a clash of ideologies might not appear that way to other people, but I found that really interesting.
Well, when we remove invasive species, some of the bigger ones, like honeysuckle, and there's quite a few that actually can get almost tree-like. And when we cut those down, we actually call them daubers, but it's an applicator for herbicide. We paint the top of the stump so that it gets to the root and keeps it from going back. So, and there are some invasive species like Japanese knotweed where you can't physically remove them like that. You need to use herbicide to get the root, because it spreads through its root system, and it's adapted for such it developed at such harsh conditions that it can withstand a lot of abuse. And
Wow.
Short of digging up the soil and getting all the roots out of there, you really got to hit it pretty hard.
Do
kill it.
we have much
Luckily in
Japanese?
this township, or in our
Do we
Japanese
have that
knotweed.
in our township? Japanese knotweed, is that?
We have one patch, I think, that Emma pointed out to us, and we're actually having a professional group come in to deal with that.
Scary. Where is that, Bruce?
That's on the south side of the tracks, between and to the east of Hagedorn.
Wow.
There's like an area back there where there's Heron Creek runs through that area.
Wow, I'm glad you're on top of that.
The Japanese,
Yeah,
this just from what I've experienced I've had with it, that's probably the most difficult invasive to control. It's something you got to hit year after year with a chemical to try to knock it back.
Yeah. It's getting established in the United States, but I guess in Europe, it's caused quite a problem. They first brought it into one of the famous gardens in Britain, and it got loose, and it's everywhere now.
Wow.
They recently discovered that Japanese knotweed induces immortality in rats. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. Well, actually, it's a powerful herb in that herbalists use in chronic Lyme disease. It is one of the key herbs used there, so it has some redeeming value.
That's good to know.
Unfortunately, though, just picking a leaf off the thing will, it reads that as, ooh, something's eating me, and then it'll try to expand a little bit more.
Wow.
It's very reactive to physical damage. Scary.
Very scary.
I was thinking that there's some neighborhoods, I think, that contract with lawn care, landscaping professionals to do mostly lawn care and cleanups and things like that. But it'd be nice to have some landscaping firms that could help with sort of the ditch garden maintenance, rain garden maintenance. And I think the Drain Commission contracts with someone to do that in the tower area, but I have to check into that. But it can be a lot of work, obviously, to keep these gardens maintained.
Say, Leroy, too, I didn't get this all out when the guest was here, but you know, these ditches, particularly county roads, municipal roads, those, if you do have conversations with the jurisdictions, it's at least the experience I've had, you got to be aware that they think of their ditches as part of the road. It's something that it's a drainage amenity to keep the road from falling apart. So in their eyes, this is a civil engineer mentality, right? Okay, so they look at these ditches as they want them pristine, clear, to convey water, to keep the water away from the sub base that gets underneath, so water's not underneath the road and causing frost damage and all that business. So that's you just got to be aware of the perspective from road builders. That's what they think of as ditches. It's to keep the water away. So when you start filling them in with plants, and then that attracts organic debris and it starts to fill in the ditch, that can be a point of contention with the civil engineer mentality, is I guess where I'm going with this.
The native plants with long tap roots, though, they suck up that water in the ditch.
Yeah, you can argue all you want with them, but they don't see things like we see things. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. They have different perspectives. It's you're right. They suck up the water, but they also tend to grow up and die back, grow up and die back, so that leaf litter starts to fill in, and then the ditch, over the years, that becomes a clog for the ditch.
That shouldn't necessarily be a barrier though for someone to do it. But knowing, I remember when the community garden by the food co-op, East Lansing Food Co-op, was thinking about going in, there was an issue that the developer was eventually going to develop that site, which they're doing right now with Trader Joe's. But that didn't stop the robust garden from blooming for several years before that happened.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm in no way trying to throw up a barrier or anything. I just want to let you know what I've run into in the past, trying to do these things in public right of ways and in ditches. The interference that you could potentially run into. Just be prepared. But I'm not trying to stop it. I think it's a great idea. Because in reality, what if you had a rain garden for 25 years and then you needed to clean it out and start over? So what? But it's hard to, sometimes it's hard to get those ideas across.
Question then for, so I live in a neighborhood with a ditch. My name's Roberta. I live in the Wardcliff area. My culvert is, and every culvert, on my block to the catch basin doesn't flow. But my question is, so over the years, I've been in my current location for almost 30 years. There's never been any maintenance on the drainage process. In other words, it's grass. And I'm assuming over the years that now the low level of the ditch is above the level of the culvert. So if I dig down to check the culvert opening, it's below the level of the dirt and grass. So my question is, can you tell me what level the base of the ditch, should the base of the ditch be at the level of the culvert, or does that not particularly matter if I'm going to do some kind of modification to the ditch and the grass and put in something that's green but not just plain grass?
I'd say it depends on who you talk to. It's going to work if the level of the ditch does not totally block the culvert. As long as there's some room for the water to escape, it's going to work. It's not going to work as well.
Okay.
If you talk to a civil engineer, they want the invert of the ditch to match the invert of the pipe. Okay, that elevation to match.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that's it. And if you really want to talk to somebody that'll drive you nuts, start talking to Michigan Department of Transportation with their engineers. You can go round and round for years until they burn up all your budget and then nothing happens. So I'll tell you, it just depends on the agency you're talking to.
Okay, so I guess then my second question or follow-up would be, it sounds like, and maybe you might just say, I'm not going to tell you that, but that maybe if I want to do some modification, like to put in something that's a pollinator-friendly plant rather than just grass, am I better off to just ask for forgiveness if someone who's in an official position comes by and says, oh, you can't do that? Or what?
It is Meridian Township, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, my experience has been that if it looks intentional, and there's different ways to make it look intentional. Mulching, fencing, just consistent types of herbs or flowers or species that you probably won't have any problem.
Okay,
But I think there's also a suggestion that came out and a couple of other dialogues about starting small and expanding from there.
okay.
There's some really cool gardens in your neighborhood, which I go through fairly often. And it would be similar, it would be interesting to look at ways to document some of the various styles
Mhm.
and share seeds, learn from each other.
Yeah,
You know, there's
Yeah.
also, I mean, not to be too cute about it, but there's little ornamental signs that, you know, little garden signs you could stick in there too. Say, you know, this is my garden, or, you know,
pollinator habitat.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Like you see along the side of the roads, wildflower area, do not mow.
I beg your pardon?
You see along the highways, you'll see wildflower area, do not mow. Those kinds
Oh,
of signs.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, but Kim shared a business card that she picked up at the Home and Garden Show. Company that does.
Oh, yeah. They come in and if you've got poison ivy that is just out of hand, and they literally had, I don't know if you'd call it a trunk or a stalk, of poison ivy that was, 6 inches across in diameter. And I mean, just huge things, and they'll come in and clear it out for you.
I guess I was thinking it was more of a natural landscaping company, but that's cool.
Yeah, no, they come in and kill the poison ivy for you.
Anything else on people's minds? Thanks for this good conversation. Next week, we are going to have Ruth Klein-Robach, who's a water expert at Michigan State. I guess she was recommended from several people about fairly dynamic speaker, and she'll kick things off and learn about groundwater, water pollution, and kind of related topics. Wellhead protection. Anything else people want to share for the recording or for the good of the whole?
I just had a question about several weeks ago, there was, I can't remember who it was, but somebody from Tri-County, I believe, that was talking about the Red Cedar Water Trail. And there apparently was a meeting a week or two ago at the Coral Gables, but it wasn't a Zoom meeting, so I didn't attend. But I don't know if anybody else attended or if anybody knows any more updates on how that's going. No big deal.
Hopefully Amanda will be back, and she's pretty plugged into that. Amanda Hathaway.
That's right.
We can certainly ask her, or I can put her email in the chat if you like. But I'll send out that to all of you, and you'll be able to get her email. There is a person who's getting fired up about some river cleanups, and his name was mentioned also recently. He just sent sent out a flyer. I'll include that in the meeting summary too. But there's planning some big river cleanups in June and September, I think.
Yeah. On the Friends of the Red Cedar Facebook page, there was someone's working with the fraternities that are along the river doing river cleanups. They posted some pictures just this weekend. So they did quite a bit, which is nice to see.
Very cool. Well, any other parting comments? Okay. Well, if you have any additional thoughts that you would like to share with the person who's doing the ditch gardens, feel free to, I'll include her email in the summary, and feel free to pass those along. And hope to see some of you next week. Not all of you, but most of you. Just kidding.
Hey, real quick, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say, we had an email go out today. Congratulations, Leroy. Your anniversary is April 1st. Thank you for 13 years of your service.
Yay.
Well, I didn't want to correct him, but I've actually been here for 15 years. But I was a contractor for my first couple years, so they don't count that. But thank you, Brian. That's sweet.
The fact that it's April 1st, does that have any significance?
And I started in February too, I believe. So anyway, don't believe everything you read and don't believe all your emails. Thank you, Brian. Anything else? Okay, you guys have a great week.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.